Hi, my name's Marnie Stockman. Self-care, I think, is different for everyone, and it means to do what you need to do to remain happy and healthy. And by happy, I don't mean just playful, silly, fun things. I think the definition of happiness is to do the work that you're meant to do to be the best version of yourself, and make the world a better place. So one thing I do for self-care is wake up an hour before I need to and an hour before everyone else. So I have time to drink my tea, do some knitting, get my day organized, and just have some brain space. And something that I have seen recently that I enjoyed, the Diplomat show. I think that's a fun one. Have a good one.
Hello again, everyone. Welcome back to Eastern Shore Talk, your podcast for all things self-care and movies. If this is your first time tuning in, we're glad to have you. We are on episode 41. I'm Jay Watson.
And I'm Cathy Castle.
And Cathy and I have a couple of very special guests to join us this week, and we're going to dive into the world of trauma and kind of how trauma during the holidays, we navigate that. And we're really going to talk to David, one of our guests tonight, about men in trauma and how men either do or do not deal with trauma. But for those of you who are from the local area, I'm sure you all know Alisha Saulsbury and the work that she does in her community as a mental health professional. She's been doing it for quite some time, and we are thrilled to have Alisha. Alisha, I'm going to let you introduce yourself to those of our viewers and listeners who may not know who you are, and now let you introduce David.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Of course.
Really. So I'm Alisha, and I'm from Easton, Maryland, and I have spent the past 30 plus, I say that and I'm like, oh my goodness, 3 decades plus, 30 plus years doing trauma-informed care, specializing in trauma, working with co-occurring disorders with children, adolescents, and adults. and the past, I would say, I don't know, David, 18 years working for the National Center of Trauma Informed Care as an expert consultant with David, and doing what we love, which is the recognition and spreading awareness and education of trauma-informed practices, and the recognition sometimes of where healing needs to take place due to an event or an experience or an emotional response. So that's who I am, and I would like to introduce David Washington. He is my colleague with the National Center for Trauma, and locally I work at Midshore Behavioral Health as the Forensic Mental Health Program Manager, and love what I do there, serving the 5 counties on the Eastern Shore. So David Washington and I, gosh, David, when did we meet?
2000.
Early 2000s.
Yep.
Yeah. And I'll let you take it from there.
Okay. So again, David, go by the name Dave. I work at the Washington County Health Department, and that's all the stuff you see back here. I am a harm reduction program coordinator. Been with the state since 2000. Working as a trauma specialist initially, and then moving on to harm reduction as a result of the amount of opioid overdoses that we have been experiencing. My introduction into harm reduction started in Baltimore while I was working at Johns Hopkins Hospital, knowing that I wanted to do some work around sexual health and healing. As a person who is a survivor of early childhood rape and sexual assault starting at age 7, but all of my outreach or wanting to do volunteer work was in centers with women. And it seemed apparent to me that the women felt a little uncomfortable with me being there. And I could tell that I needed to remove myself from that space so that it could be safer. Went to Hopkins, graduated from Wilder University May 20th. And on May 24th, they said, we would like for you to come and do some work in Washington County doing trauma work. And I was like, yes, that's awesome. The universe is lined up. And when I got here, they said, oh, it's going to be at a detention center. And I thought it was crazy. Like, detention center is trauma. But I have spiritual principles in my life that I try to follow, and one of those is being in connection with the power greater than myself. And I thought, well, if you brought me here, there must be a reason. And little did I know that my life would be changed forever, and being blessed to do the kind of work that I do. So right now I'm sitting in my office in Washington County. I'm at the Mason-Dixon line, where Pennsylvania, West Virginia, and Maryland meet. So again, I feel grateful to be a part of this. Thank you for inviting me.
Wow, we're glad to have you, David.
So you're not far from Pittsburgh.
I'm about 3 hours from Pittsburgh.
Oh, it's yeah. Probably on the map it doesn't look that far, but yeah, driving through the mountains it probably does take 3 hours.
Which side are you on this Saturday?
Yeah, literally, I can walk from my house to Pennsylvania.
No, I mean, which football team are you rooting for?
I have no idea.
David.
You haven't gotten him there yet, eh?
No.
We were on doing a workshop somewhere. Remember we flew down after the Super Bowl and you're like, why are all these people wearing jerseys?
Right.
I was like, David.
Yeah, I'm so oblivious to it and be like, yeah.
Super Bowl was last night.
Well, we're just gonna say it. Go Ravens.
That's right.
Yeah. Well, because if they win, we'll have a day off. I'll get a day off.
Jay's not even a Ravens fan. What am I talking
No,
about?
I'm a Washington fan, so I have to. I'm sort of an outsider in Easton, being a Washington fan.
Yeah.
They're good this year.
They are.
Jay, do you have a preference on who wins Saturday?
I really don't. I don't dislike the Ravens at all. I kind of, sort of, somewhat follow them because I listen to 105.7 The Fan because they do the Orioles and they do Maryland sports, so I listen to them. So I get all the Ravens, and I actually listen to more Ravens football talk radio than I do Washington because I can't even remember last time I watched it. This is the Washington Commanders talk radio stuff. So
I think Jay's a secret Ravens fan.
I think he is too. I think he is too.
No, I'm kind of neutral with the Ravens. I am a diehard Washington fan. It's weird that I'm a Washington Commanders fan, but I'm an Oriole fan. So
that's okay.
Yeah.
We'll let you slide on one.
That's right, just one.
You have to be an Oriole.
Yes.
So David, something that you said, David, really was a very familiar thing with me, and Alisha and Cathy both know. Which is where the origins of this whole thing, Easter Shore Talk, began. I was also a experienced sexual childhood trauma at 6 or 7 years old. 2 different family members, 2 different events. So that's kind of the origins of my dealings with trauma and anxiety, depression, PTSD. All that has been part of my journey my whole life. So yeah, I'm really want to kind of, I'm really looking forward to that part of the conversation. But Alisha, I'd like for you to kind of touch on, seeing as though this is the holiday season, and Cathy and I did an episode a couple weeks ago about quote unquote seasonal depression and the both diagnosed and the kind of the social descriptors of the seasonal blues or whatever. I want to kind of get into a little bit, Alisha, with you as far as navigating trauma in the holidays and how that can be a trigger for a lot of folks.
Yeah, it really is. And it's just the season progresses. Advertisements begin. We see it in the stores. Those are all huge, very big triggers. And any one of us, whether it be childhood adversities or as an adult, if we are lucky enough, blessed enough to live a long life, we're going to be going down a path that's going to impact us with these adversities. And so with all of that being said, it could be grief, it could be illness, it could be relationships change, it could be with careers, it could be a multitude of many different things, of types of losses. For one person it might be pretty stressful, another person might be traumatic, so we can never assume. That's a whole another several hour conversation. But I think just being able to navigate all of the media, um, what happens, whether it be on TV, advertisements, retail in the stores, social media. We also have to learn to set boundaries. Excuse me, because you hear it on the radio, whether it's by accident or purposefully. It's the most wonderful time of the year. And then that can evoke feelings of, well, it used to be, but I lost my dad, or I lost my whomever, grandmother. And I have bittersweet, nostalgic memories, that evokes all of that, the child in all of us. And we might also, really go to battle inside ourselves with that, because it's like, more blame and shame. Well, why do I feel bad about that? I shouldn't. And perhaps you're grieving, a loss or something like that. So, society, the world, it just keeps spinning. So I think it's important to set boundaries if one's going through like something acute, like something that's raw, something that's brand new, that has recently happened. That could be grief, bereavement, um, and giving yourself permission to be able to say, and grace, like you would for somebody else. I mean, oftentimes we give our fellow neighbors and peers so much grace, and friends. Well, the benefit of the doubt for everything, and then for ourselves, it's like we're not so kind to. And I think it's important to be very cognizant and mindful of that. And you hear things on the radio, you see things on TV. So limiting that is important, and knowing that, like, it's okay to not be okay for a little while. And then, of course, if something gets to be in self-care, I hope to be able to talk a lot about that, because that's very important, and I'm a big supporter of that. But I mean, it just can bring about mixed emotions, just like, just mixed emotions in general. And it should be a time, it's portrayed through songs and through the media as joyous and warm. And it's like, and for some folks, I know, just asking the word, and like as a therapist and just talking, where was your safe place? Like, define what your safe place looks like, smells like, feels like, the sensory stuff. And to have someone look at you at times, I've had this often in my career, and just say, and they start to cry and say, I don't even know what that looks like. So sometimes it's creating that um, safe place. But I just think it's okay to allow grace and create your own family, if you will. And if you do have those childhood adversities, and instead of isolation, creating through friendships, that's a family you create of your own, and you have things in common with, whereas Aunt Jane comes to the dinner table, and she's going to say, oh, you look like you're not eating enough, or have you gained some weight, or whatever. It's like, oh, those things evoke, you're already you've got the trauma response before the family gathering. So, I mean, it's important to surround yourself with the like-minded folks that respect you and your boundaries.
So, Alicia, I'm glad you brought up the whole self care aspect of dealing with trauma any time of year, but especially during the holidays, because Kath and I have talked about this quite a bit. Part of I like to put self care into kind of two categories. The one category are those things that we specifically do to concentrate on mind, body, and soul. And to me, that second category is, what are those things that take our mind to a better place?
Mm-hmm.
Those hobbies, or it could be going out in nature, or drinking a hot cup of tea, that are just overall, that just makes us feel good just in general. So I'm glad you brought that up, because as Kathy and I have talked about, again, I think although it's more difficult when we're going through it, it's also most important that we kind of lean on those self-care things, because if we had been doing them prior to whatever event, if this is an event that's more recent, then we know we've kind of built that thing in our mind where we know, okay, if I go take a walk on the beach, or if I go grab a cup of hot tea, or if I go get my nails done, or if I go get a massage, we know we've kind of built that callus up where we know those are those things I can depend on. So, not that those things are always the answer, but even if it's just for 15 or 20 minutes, if we kind of break it down into like smaller pieces of the day and just kind of go from self-care to self-care. Yeah, because I like to describe this podcast as self-care movies. And self-care is just such like this big umbrella. And Cathy and I like to say it's that tool in the toolbox. It's the Swiss Army knife that kind of, you can kind of take it out and kind of helps a little bit with everything. So, yeah, I'm glad you brought the whole self-care part of it up.
Well, and Jay, I just looked up the tip sheet that we had from the Holiday Blues segment we did, and maybe it's worth repeating again, thinking about what we're talking about. And, these aren't things that are shockingly new, but here's some of the things off the list. One, stick to normal routines as much as possible, because this is a time where we're like taking on the universe. At least some of us Santa elves out there think that we got to take on everything, right? Make sure we're getting enough sleep, because this is a time where we're pushing it, man, and we're not getting enough sleep. And then maybe even worrying about what we haven't done in the middle of the night, making ourselves still get less sleep because of that. Take time for yourself, but don't isolate yourself. Alisha already said that. Spend time with supportive, caring people. She definitely said that, so that echoes that. Eat and drink in moderation. We know that alcohol can, even though that we feel like it might pick us up, but it could also bring us really down. And also we seem to know that if we eat too much, we also can feel a little bad by all the goodies that are surrounding us. Get exercise in when you can, and that doesn't mean you gotta go to Jay's gym and work out like a boss, right? You can certainly take a walk. I love my famous exercises, going into our training room and taking phone conversations and walk while I'm on the phone. Make a to-do list for yourself, but keep it very simple. Don't overcomplicate it. Listen to music or other things that can calm you down. Set a financial budget for holiday activities and gifts, because financial stress is a big one. And then set reasonable goals and expectations for yourself around everything: shopping, cooking, entertaining, attending things, sending cards. I had to quit the card business years ago. It was too much. Anyway, just thought it was worth repeating that.
So David, it's interesting how as I've kind of number one, from what Alicia's told me, and for number two, looking at some of your Facebook posts, you do a lot of work with men and trauma. So, and it's interesting. Knowing that I was doing this topic this week, I put a post out yesterday on Facebook talking about societal roles and how society is kind of assigned roles for both men and women, and how we're quote unquote supposed to fit into these roles. And the male role is supposed to be the leader and the strong and the head of the family, and not show weakness, and all the stigmas and stereotypes that we've heard. So it's interesting how on Spotify, we have 70% of our listeners on Spotify are male. That shocks me. I'm tickled, but it's so we're going to talk to them for a few minutes here. So, Alisha and Cathy both kind of touched on, things to look out for, things we can do as we're, navigating the holidays, and some trauma responses and triggers. So, David, take that a step further as far as how and why men kind of handle and navigate their trauma differently than women do.
A couple of things that I was thinking as I was listening to Alisha and Cathy share, and that is, what is acceptable for self-care for males. And so I was born in 1965, and I remember when I entered treatment, and a lot of the self-care practices were like, well, take a bath, rub your body down with oil. And I was thinking, I don't think so. That's not going to really work for me. And at that point, I was very closed-minded. And we would do groups with men, and we would, we had the curriculum, it's evidence-based or evidence-supported. And they would look at that stuff and they were like, are you kidding me? Rub myself down with oil. And again, I was working with men that were incarcerated. So we had to step back and look at, well, what were the things that we do as men that are a form of self-care, even that terminology, self-care. And I'm so grateful that we've seen the shift, over between the early 2000s and on, where men are able to even express themselves more about their feelings and the way they view things. But for some of us that grew up in that generation where, if you're not going hunting to kill something, then that's self, at least, especially here in Western Maryland, hunting and drinking was the thing to do. And Cathy, I love that about the drinking, because it's amazing. Alcohol is a sedative. So if I'm already having trauma responses that are making me more depressed or sad, and then I'm adding alcohol to that, it's probably going to bring me down more than pick me up, even though it will mimic a stimulant.
And it may not that day. You may not feel it's the next day when you really start to feel.
Yeah. And a lot of our socialization around what we're calling self-care would be to go to the bar, to go to the country club and have a couple drinks, which was in some way could be sedating the trauma response, to where it's actually, I love that the body bears the burden because I'm not dealing with it. It's actually growing inside of me. So for men in this time of year, there's also that thing about, well, I don't have enough money to buy everything that the kids want, or my wife wants, or my partner wants. And that's making me upset. And the message that I got from childhood was that you were supposed to be able to do all these things, especially, on a Christmas holiday, and you're failing. And then some of those, whether it's early childhood trauma, teen trauma, where I'm not okay. I'm not okay. And for some males, that comes out in violence. Right. Not all. A lot of times it comes out, and I start projecting those feelings onto my partner, on the coworkers, driving down the road 90 miles an hour, cutting people off. We see a lot of that this time of year. So I know I've been privileged enough to be able to step back and look at what are these things that I do as a result of trauma. Or I love we work with the Arapaho indigenous people, and trauma is not a word that they have in their vocabulary. They call it spiritual wounding. And sometimes just shifting the terminology from trauma, because some males, we think, well, Vietnam War, Afghanistan, that's trauma. And we start talking about spiritual wounding as men, and it's like, well, what do you mean by that? Were you ever playing softball and you thought your mom and dad were going to come and they didn't come, and you had some feelings about that? So some of that starts to come up, especially, I think, Christmas can be like the anniversary of some destructive, dysfunctional family dynamics, right? And as men, take charge. How do we help the men that we come in contact begin to be a little more open to spiritual wounding events? And I've been fortunate enough to work with men from across the United States and Canada, where we've stated, how do we let people know you may have experienced these events and that there is help? There's Men's Healing, 1 in 6 are great support groups. So if you're going through something, being able to get in touch with 1 in 6, which primarily focuses on sexual assault, but can also steer people towards other supportive networks. So I hope that answered the question.
Wow, I really, you know what I love? This is so good. I love that we're, Jay, I know you're burning. You got probably so much to say. I love that we're talking about the male perspective, because I do think we, women, we're touchy-feely and we talk about stuff, but I think we forget our guys. And I think, as a culture, as a United States anyway, I think we are better, I think, but I think we did raise men to shove it under the rug, right? And we'll just let that pile just keep piling up under the rug. And it's just a shame that that's the way men have had to feel for so long. And I like that you brought up that there's different language to think about, I guess across different cultures. We may call it trauma, but I have not heard this spiritual wounding, right? Is that what you said?
Yeah.
Spiritual wounding. So it's good to educate people on what that looks like across the board here, and I like that. I appreciate that you brought that out.
Yeah. And the program he was talking about in
1 in
Dorchester.
6? Is that the 1 in 6?
1 in 6. Yeah, that's a good one.
I haven't heard that resource. So
that's the sexual abuse for men.
I think that's
yeah.
I think that's
how would one find that resource real quick?
Just 1in6.org.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Is it literally the number 1, or is it written out?
It's one, the number 1.
Okay.
And 6. Yeah. Another great resource is the Bristol Cone Project.
Say that one more time.
The Bristol Cone Project.
Spell that out, David.
BRI. So I'm going to write it up myself. It's the BRISTLECONE, Bristol Cone Project. And there are videos of men who have survived, over 200, I think he has 200 men now that have survived early childhood trauma, and what it's been like for us as men in our relationships, employment, any number of aspects of our life. I think mind, body, spirit, and how it impacts who we are, and then how we can decide whether we want to stay there or change.
So, David, a couple of things that you said really, the first one's going to sound very random, but the first thing that I was thinking of when you were talking was, and I know based on your Facebook post, you're a big music guy. So have you ever heard of Dax?
No, I don't.
There's a guy named Dax. He's kind of he's actually Canadian, but he's kind of country rap combo. And he put out a song a couple years ago called "What It's Like to Be a Man," and there's a version where him and Darius Rucker do a version together. Then there's a version where he does with 5 or 6 other artists, and they each sing a verse, and they each brought their own story as part of the verse, and they all talk about the expectations of men, how men are supposed to deal with things, and addiction and abuse and all these things that oftentimes come, that men deal with as trauma and go into carrying their trauma. And I told Cathy this back when it came out. It's the most important piece of music I've ever heard in my lifetime. And I'm a big music fan.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And his name is Dax, and it's called What It's Like to Be a Man. And if you go on YouTube, it's the super mashup version is the one with him and 5 or 6 other artists. And they each, there's the original version he does with Darius Rucker, and that's how he wrote it. And those 2 of them sing it together. But him with the multiple artists, they each brought their own version of their experiences as their verse. And 2 of the people that sing are women, and they're like, I didn't understand. I apologize for not, realizing what you were going through as a man, which was fantastic. I get goosebumps talking about it because I've probably played it 100 times in the first month that I heard it, because it's so powerful, but it tells you a story from a perspective that we have never heard in music ever. And they're like, hey, this is what it's like to be man. And these are the expectations that are cast upon us. And as men, we need to do better. As society needs to do better in casting these expectations upon men. That was the first thing that came about. And the second thing was, you were talking about self-care and how self-care, the term self-care, and Kath and I very early on in the podcast talked about the misconceptions of self-care and that term, and how people don't understand what the term means. And as you're talking, I was like, you were talking about specifically with men's misconceptions of that term of self-care and how they're unaware of it. And it had never dawned on me, even being a man, that men have their own type of misconception of the term self-care because of those expectations of being a man. So, you need to listen to that music, number one.
I want to share and Alisha knows this gentleman. You may have heard of him, Dan Griffin. He does a whole curriculum called Men's Healing with Stephanie Covington, who's an expert in trauma work. But he shares a story about one fish, not necessarily Nemo, swims up to these two fish and says, and I'm probably messing up, but he says, "How's the water?" And the fish said, "What are you talking about? How's the water?" And because they're living in the water, they don't realize what they're in. And I think for a lot of us as men, we don't know, and I'm not a big fan of the toxic masculinity terminology because I think it has a lot of judgment in it, but we don't necessarily know or have the opportunities to step back. And I think that's a privilege, right? To be able to step back and go, what is making up all of this, right? As a man. And no one ever asked me, what does it mean to be a man in middle school, high school, or college? It was when I was going through trauma treatment and providing trauma treatment that someone said, well, the box, what does it mean to live in the box as a man? So I think it's great to be able to have opportunities like this where we can help men or assist men that want to step back and go, what are some of the lessons that I've learned that don't necessarily hold true for me today as the man that I want to be? I grew up with a father that he worked 8 to 5. He came home, he expected a meal on the table. Well, you know what? In 2024, being in a relationship, both partners might not get home till 5.
Yeah.
So I think it doesn't make a lot of sense for me to be like, well, where's dinner?
Yeah.
Expectations, right?
Right. Well, I've worked just as much as you. What makes you think that I'm going to make dinner?
Nobody's ever said that to me,
my dad, right? We might be dating some people like that.
Right.
Because I've grown up with that, and it's not conscious. But you want me to make dinner? Why would I make dinner?
That's the boomer generation, right?
Yeah,
Right.
it is. It is. Even cutting grass. Like, I like lawn care, self-care. I'm out there weed eating and
Right,
I'm out there mowing. And the women are like, you got to stop this.
I'm putting that right on the man in my house. I am not cutting that
If it's not a palm tree, Kathy's not going to do it.
You got it, Jen.
Kathy, this was like in our 20s. Oh, that neighborhood. And I remember being out there, and one of our neighbors, who's one of my neighbors now.
Oh, I thought you were talking about the person that went to the Cape.
No, across the street.
All right.
Yeah. So, we were neighbors. So I was out there mowing the lawn because to me that's self-care. It's predictable. It's I like to see the lines in the grass. It's just something I also like to do dishes versus use my dishwasher. Or run the vacuum. Okay. But we all have our things. And
Kathy's going to have a breakdown.
for some it's traumatic, for some it's self-care. So that's why we're all different. And I remember this one female came up to me and she's like, you've got to stop doing that. That's a man's job. And I was like, that's a man's job. I really resented that. She's my neighbor next door now, this neighborhood. And I continue to like to I like it's nature, to me, that is, fresh air, natural surroundings, clears the mind. But when you were talking about the men, going back to that, so on the Eastern Shore, I feel like there's stigma here. Eastern Shore, David, you mentioned like hunting, and if you weren't a hunter and you didn't like to go out and kill animals, you weren't considered masculine.
Yes.
And I've seen that, in my family, and it's just like, well, they just don't like to hunt, so that's but there is a stigma. And I feel like it was interesting, David, because you said here in Western Maryland, I feel like on the Eastern Shore, it's even more pronounced. And there's more of a divide if you don't live up to that standard. Like, as a man, this is what we do. We hunt, we have our guns on the back of our, trucks, and proudly, because that's what we do. And that kind of is part of our identity. But with regard to trauma and trauma treatment, interesting thing, and it just came to mind, and I thought I'd throw it out there. So I work with the female. I was working with female specific for like 23 years in my career. wearing a different hat now. And David was working with the men, and then we would come together and we'd trade stories when we would get to chat and have lunch and get together. And it was interesting because there was monies for a program to do. Well, what about the men? The men need some trauma treatment here um, in the facilities, and it was a detention center. It's already traumatic. So we started one. We were able to get a grant, got monies. So men had that. And guess what? Men were not coming to a trauma group. However, the men were very enticed when we called it the anger management group. Oh, yeah. Yeah. We have a lot on our shoulders. We're always angry. Angry about being up in this place, angry about whatever. And that was okay. There was a wait list. However, trauma group, which it was, they had different acronym, but they had no parts of it. And basically it was the same. That's what it was. Nature of the beast. But anyway, yeah. Why
I
is
know
there?
Marty does a group. You're probably aware of that, Alicia. He's done it for a very long time with court ordered, usually men, although it's not necessarily a male group, but it's usually men that have gotten into some kind of legal trouble because of domestic violence of some sort. But I know it's shifted for him, and he's really, and it's an evidence-based program as well, but he's put a lot of self-care into that group. And, he feels that men are opening up more to talking about feelings than they ever were. So I was really glad to hear that, not, I'm sure there's people that are still saying, well, the way I was brought up,
Right.
This is the way you do it, or I was hit and I'm okay. But look at you, you're here in the group. But, I think that it seemed to me that Marty's feedback too is that people are becoming more open to hearing talking about feelings and self-care. So that makes me happy. I will share this little story too. I'm a fan of a local business called Alternative Therapy in town here in Easton, and I go there periodically because I'm a fan. Don't judge me, but I'm a fan of IVs. Like I get some immune boosting IVs if it's a holiday, and I don't want to. I think maybe it could be psychological, but I don't want to catch cooties, or I'm getting ready to go on a cruise ship. I'll go get the IV, and I swear I'm like got an armor of protection. But I went in there one day this summer and took my dad in, actually, because he was doing some work for me. And I know he was dehydrated. I was like, I think I almost killed him. So I took him in to get an IV full of men in this place. And I'm like, is this man day? What is this? What happened? I never see somebody. They were in there. They're like, no, we're taking over. You girls aren't the only ones taking care of yourself. And I just thought that was the funniest thing. I'm like, now they're going to have sports betting in here or something.
That's good. That's so good. I've seen the men in those chairs too. I like that stuff too.
I'm like, good for them. They need to take care of themselves.
And pedicures.
Mine gets a pedicure. Marty gets a pedicure.
So Jeff's had like one or two, and I was like, Jeff, you've got to. You do it because you do it for your loved ones.
Take care of your feet. You gotta take care of your
Stop being so selfish, Jeff. Come on.
You should have want that crusty heel on her.
Those calluses.
That's your foot.
Now, Alisha, does Jeff get a massage at all? Does he go to get massages?
No. I signed him up for one, and then he was, So then this was some years ago, and he was like, no. And I think men are kind of afraid of that kind of stuff too. I get one.
Oh, I do. I go once a month.
Once a month. Me too.
We don't have a problem with self-care here.
No.
The thought of a stranger touching your body was like, no way, not doing it. And
well, the first time I ever went, I went because somebody had given me a gift certificate many years ago.
Okay.
And this was back when I was much more so living in trauma response, and I was antisocial. I didn't want to have to be in this tiny little room. Forget having someone touch me. I didn't want to have to talk to somebody in this enclosed little room. And I was wigged out the whole time. But I tell you, I swear by it now. Cathy, when she goes, she sees colors. I haven't graduated to seeing colors yet. I've got to go to Colin Perry because Colin must have some magic fingers because I've never seen. Of course, I fall asleep, so That's all I'm seeing is my
I usually
eyelids.
do.
Yeah, but it's not during the regular deep tissue. It's during the Reiki or the cranial sacral part of it. That's where I see color.
Oh,
It's
I'm
like
Swedish.
I see you got to expand. But I will say, talking to Jay about men and massage. I'm just putting my poor husband's dirty laundry all out here. But Marty, David, my husband is also a social worker, and we work for the same company. But and he's fabulous.
Kathy's Marty's boss. I mean, let's make that clear.
He's the clinical director, and she's director of the whole thing.
I'm his boss in more ways than one. But anyway,
So he'll be on next week to defend himself.
Yeah. But he's been one of those ones where like I don't know about the massage stuff. That's just weird.
Yeah.
But he lost one of his brothers in August of a medical complication. His brother was fairly young, 54. But I made him go. He went, and he's like, I'm telling you, I'm so glad I went to get that massage afterwards. And I think part of the healing part of that session was, of course, I already prepped Kyle and I already told her all the dirt, right?
Right.
So she already knew what was going on. So she knew how to talk to him. But he said he really felt different after that, able to talk about some of the stress that was going on about, the grief, the loss of his brother, but also being able to connect with the massage and the release that he needed. So I agree.
Mm-hmm.
Massage, you men that don't like, you gotta just find a right girl or guy, whatever.
Right.
Right massage person.
We carry so much of our trauma and our stress in our bodies.
Yeah.
And massage, it's not the only thing, but it goes such a long way. And I was going every other week there for a while, but then
That's good.
I got into a better place, so I've now going once a month. So yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I've had some kinks in my neck, and Marty's like, "You got an appointment soon?" Because he's tired of needing my shoulder. You got an appointment soon? I'm like, that's a nice way of saying I don't really feel like doing this.
You're right.
So
exactly, I know.
Here's a question for all three of you, and there might not even be. Cathy knows I'm an analytical person, and I'm always digging for the why behind anything. So these kind of social labels and social expectations, where do they come from? As far as there are male expectations, there are female expectations. Is there an answer to what the root of that is?
Don't you think some of it might be coming from instinctual, Men had to go club the tiger or whatever, drag home dinner. I mean, do you think that some of that is just nature?
I think a lot of it's nature, but I think a lot of it's also media.
Yeah.
Like if we were just to turn everything off and go off the grid, and I've done that before, it's wonderful. You don't know what the heck's happening.
But we're never going to society unplug.
So that's a problem, because then that can also be pathological to put yourself in a bubble. I need to quit sick.
Well, I don't know. I guess David, with your work, you're the man expert, perhaps. Mm-hmm. Do you think? And I think I'm a man expert because I have 4 sons and a husband, but really, among the expert of 5 people. But do you think, in the work you're doing, do you feel that we're doing a better job of teaching our young males to look inward, reflect, take care of themselves with self-care? Do you think we're doing a better job or no? I know we always have work to do, but
yeah. I know, like as Jay was posing that question, I was thinking like social psychology. Was that a heart?
Jay's window.
Okay. I was thinking
impeccable timing.
The books we read, the literature that we're asked to even explore through elementary, middle, high school, the music we listen to, the magazines, and the digital world. I'm not so sure we're doing a better job because how many of them are looking at what's on this? And if this is what's telling me how to be a man, I don't know where our children are going to go.
That's why I thought that song was so important. But go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt you. Yeah.
I do think that because I believe in like chakra and energy. I do think the world is going to take care of itself one way or the other. And I think, like, again, opportunities like this where, like, Jay and I say we are men who have experienced this and this is what we do. It works for us. If you're interested in it, we'll share it with you. Yeah.
I tell you, David, and I don't know. I'll just speak for myself. And yes, it goes to my specific trauma, but also goes to my struggles in general when I was younger. The whole picture. I'm at a place now where I am who I am because of my struggles, not in spite of my struggles. Um, and I tell people this, and they always give me the side eye when I say this. I'm grateful for everything I went through because I don't, I don't, I don't get the very best qualities of Jay without having gone through that. I would like to believe I would have been a nice person, a good person anyway. There's no way. I don't believe that. I just, it formed me. We grow more from our struggles than we do from our victories. I just believe that. And look, no 6 or 7 year old should have to go through that. Don't get me wrong. And it sucked for me. And you talked earlier about the story with the fish and not being in the water and not realizing they were in the water. That was me for most of my life. When you're in it, you don't know. I didn't know how bad we don't know what we don't know. Mm-hmm. I didn't know how bad I was struggling for 40 years. And I was lucky enough to have, I know now, God's grace be with me for me to be able to say, man, what is going on? My life is not what it's supposed to be. What's my role in this? And it came from a long line of failed relationships. And yes, those people may not have been the right person for me, but I can't control their part of that. I can control my part of it and what was my part in it. And my self-reflection as a result of failed relationships over years evolved into, okay, now I had to tap into how I was carrying my trauma forward and why I was making the choices I was making. And I wasn't working on me enough to build a strong enough foundation of Jay to be able to carry that in a healthier way. It's always going to be with me, and Cathy has been the brunt of some moments here, not too distant past, where I've had days and moments where those anxiety, that like the physical manifestations of anxiety, just were. One was in the movie theater. I had to leave the movie theater, and I don't ever do that. But it's important to know. And you talked earlier about finding people of like mindset. That's huge. This whole process of Eastern Shore Talk, it has been such a godsend for me in my process, because to have people reach out that are strangers, because I've told my story either on Facebook or on the podcast, and say, Jay, I've been through the same thing, or I'm glad you told your story because it makes me feel like I'm not alone. And when you're a teen or a young adult and you've had these things happen to you when you're a child, the world is this big dark cloud, and you think, you intellectually can understand that, yes, there are people that have probably gone through similar things, but they're not you. So you feel alone, and you make it worse by self-isolating, and to be able to at least begin to normalize the conversation around, hey, the person across the street, the person that I work with, so a family member, they're all struggling or have struggled in some way. We all have that in common. But Cathy, I'm waiting for that time. I've had so many people, Alisha, as you may know, that have reached out to me privately since I started this whole thing and talked about their story. And we've had people come on this podcast who told their story for the very first time. It's been amazing. I'm waiting for the first male to reach out to me privately and say, Jay, I'm glad you talked about this, da 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 da. They've all been females, and that's great. And I love the whole connective, common ground kind of thing that, we can all get through this thing called life much easier together than we can on our own. So yeah, I don't know why I just rambled all that stuff that just kind of came flying out
Jay,
of my mouth.
Jay, you know what I think you're
Great.
talking about, though, and I want to do a whole podcast on this, is post-traumatic growth. You've definitely had post-traumatic growth, and David and Alicia, I'm sure, know about that. I love the concept of post-traumatic growth, which is doing exactly what you said, taking your struggles, because we can't change it, it happened, and being better because it, being better because of it, being stronger because of it, finding ways to thrive because of it. And that's exactly what you have done, and I think it would be good for us to do a segment on that as well.
Doesn't define you, it's a part of you.
Yeah.
And the growth that came from it, and the insights, and the
And
giving back.
Sorry. And do they all know Dr. Joan? Do they all know Joan?
They
Joan
do.
Glee?
I may have told, well, Cathy might know through some conversations, and Jay, like when we were traveling more prior to COVID.
Because she turned me on to the Ernest Hemingway line, "We are stronger at our broken places," and I just think that's incredible. And again, and I want to honor the fact that I've been privileged to do that, because as we sit here talking, I think about the kid that's in where I live, Smithsburg, in the small outreach of Washington County, that doesn't have access to TV, to radio, or to even an opportunity to get the privilege that I've been given to recover. And one of my things, whenever Alicia answers we do something, I'm like, yes, because you never know who's gonna hear it, see it, and then like planting that seed, or as another friend says, dropping that pebble in the water and watching it ripple. And again, another Native American guy talked about, like, one raindrop turns into a stream, turns into a river, turns into an ocean. And I hope before I leave this planet that we have trauma-informed care like everywhere, so that every man, woman, and child has access to explore how have those spiritual issues impacted you.
Hey, David, why don't you explain that to somebody? If somebody's listening to all this and everything that's being said, I think is wonderful and amazing. But if somebody is listening back to this tomorrow and they're saying, wait, what does trauma-informed care mean? Does that mean, what is that? Am I asking for something? So could you guys, for somebody who, that's the first time they've heard of it, kind of just speak a little bit about that term?
I think Alicia would do a better job than I would.
Like, if you're saying, what I would like is for trauma-informed care to be everywhere, just kind of explain to
So there's principles. So we don't, like, there's the 4 R's. And David, you and I, when we travel together, even though we do this all the time, we'll sit in each other's hotel rooms drinking coffee for hours. We're so crazy about, like,
She
going
can go longer than me. Like, about 10 o'clock, I want to go to bed. She's like, no. I'm like, it's 12 o'clock.
No, David.
Jesus took a break in the garden.
That's because she's had too much coffee.
It's decaf tea. But anyway, it's just natural. So the 4 R's: realize that perhaps a traumatic event has happened in the world that we live. Because I always say, think of like universal precautions, what we used to do pre-COVID with germs. Like, just let's always wash our hands, because we never know. A germ may exist on surfaces that we're touching, and before we put it in our finger in our mouth or whatever, some of these habits with our face. So I always use that as kind of an analogy. Universal precautions in healthcare, people are like, oh yeah. And then with COVID, it could be a mask, it could be hand washing, sanitizers. So the 4 R's are: realize that perhaps an event has happened, recognize that, respond, and then resist re-traumatization. So you don't want to, you want to mitigate the effects of trauma if it's already happened. You certainly don't want to re-traumatize. And then there's safety. There's principles. There's 6 principles, and that's like safety, voice and choice, empowerment, collaboration, transparency, through all things. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. And that's those are the main principles. And when you look through a trauma-informed care lens, And then there's the 3 E's, like an emotional response to an event and an experience that's happened. Those are like the main gurus of trauma informed care. And I know that's a lot, but there's 4 R's: to realize, recognize, respond, resist, re-traumatization. And then you cannot, like, if you're in a relationship with a therapist and you like connecting with nature, walking in the park, hiking, those things release endorphins and things like that. That's not helpful enough. Or you're keeping routines, journaling, yoga, meditation, reading recovery books, creating like your go-to playlist with music. Those are empowering. That's like environmental grounding. Like I need to go to my go-to. That always makes me feel good. If those things aren't working and you go to a therapist, like seeking professional help, and you don't just connect maybe with somebody, that's okay. Find somebody where you do connect with, and especially
Alicia,
with trauma.
I think that's important.
Yes.
I'd like to pause and say that again.
Yes.
What I hear you saying is you are in charge of you.
Yeah.
So if all of your combination of self-care things that you're trying to do so desperately is not working, and then you've moved on, you're like, oh, I want to talk to somebody, which is also a necessary thing for a lot of people.
Mhm.
If it's not your match, it's okay. That's what I hear you saying. Maybe
Yeah.
find the person that's the right match for you.
Right. It's the cornerstone, I think, of self-care. If those other things aren't working, therapists just provide that safe place, for their feelings to begin the healing process. But that's the principles of trauma-informed care and all, like safety, voice and choice, trustworthiness. If you're not feeling that, don't just, like I tell folks all the time, don't just quit. Talk to the person about what you're feeling first. Maybe you can, work this out. I'm big with communication. However, if that doesn't work, got to go back to the drawing board, and perhaps, we as an adult, we have choices. We do.
So let me ask another question of the two of you, and I'm thinking about our listeners. So if you're a family member, you're a friend, you're a neighbor, whatever you are, and you feel like somebody you care about is having a difficult time or a trauma response, whatever it is, what would be your tips for those helpers? And I'm not talking about the clinicians, just everyday helpers, because we all see it all the time where people sometimes things can make other people uncomfortable. They may say the wrong thing, they may avoid it altogether, but what is something that the buddy system can do? How can you help somebody?
I'm a big follower of Brene Brown. If you ever get to see her video Empathy, it's like 3 minutes long or something like that. But for me, and what I've found effective is to say something simple as, I'm here for you.
Mhm.
I like it.
That's it. I'm here for you.
You don't have to be an expert.
No.
You could be, Jay, listen, I'm holding a safe space for you. I'm here for you. I'm listening.
Yep.
And then to truly do that, because I think that's the gift, and not be with that person like, oh, cell phone, movie, work, to truly to be there with them during that moment.
Yeah.
And again, this is just I think we're really disconnected as a result of what we've seen with media, internet, and we already, you see a family out at dinner and everybody's on their cell phone.
Yes.
I think you guys have said it. You're talking about creating a safe space, a safe conversation. You don't have to have all the answers, right?
Nope.
You just be there and hold space for people and make the point that you care about them. They're important, and you're there to listen, right?
Presence.
That's the big one, and don't have to solve it, because I know social workers will solve it. Well, why don't you, do this or do that? No, just, okay, I'm here for you.
Right. I'm here for you, walking beside the person.
Yeah.
And then saying, I'm so sorry. I wish I could change things, but I'm here for you. I'm walking beside you, and that they're not alone. Like there's a togetherness.
Yeah.
We'll get through this together. There's strength in that.
And I feel like as we're having this serious conversation, and I'm glad we're having this serious conversation, and we're acknowledging that Hollies can be heavy, that if people are struggling, I think you've said a couple things. Find somebody that you can talk to. There's lots of people out there that will be glad to talk to you. There's also, some hotlines out there. Alisha, you're representing our local behavioral health authority. I don't know if you want to talk about any of those.
988. Yeah.
What I was gonna say, 988.
Yeah.
And 988, literally, you can
Yeah.
text it.
Yep.
You can text to know. So
Yep.
explain to someone how they would text 988 if they're
So they would just text 988 and someone would be there to help them. It's like a crisis line. There's also, we have people that work like mobile crisis, because I know this is shown many different places.
and 988 is a national program.
Yes, 988 is national, but I was so some of the local would be finding your local mobile crisis hotlines, and they're trained in CIT, crisis. They're law enforcement, before things escalate, and they're trained professionals that can be there as well, walking beside you and with you, before things could possibly escalate or. Yeah. So very good resources to keep on hand.
And I know Midshore Behavioral Health, your employer, Alisha, and my employer too, Channel Walker. We all have websites that have a gazillion resources listed out.
Yep.
Midshore Talk also has a website.
Yep.
So if you want to do that independently,
yep.
Locals.
Locals. Yeah, definitely check out. And those that aren't local, check out like your local behavioral health authorities or just Google. I mean, that is one good thing about the old cell phones. We have information and connection, and we're hardwired for connection, people. I always say people are crutches, but like going back to what you were saying, Cathy, like what about the person that, is isolating and like a buddy, they don't need a clinician. I think eyes on them and knowing them and having that safe and created that safe place and that trustworthiness already in that relationship, you're going to know. And just being there. And sometimes I think as social workers, David, you were talking about like finding the answers, we want to fix it, or whatever. It's okay to be silent. Just listen.
And then, at least with this discussion, there's a part of me that's thinking about how many families have been impacted by overdoses, whether it led to someone transitioning to the next life or not. Who's doing the trauma work with those families?
Mm-hmm.
Who's doing the trauma work with those kids?
Yeah.
And how many thousands of people die a year, and they're all attached to someone, attached to somebody, attached to somebody, attached to somebody. And for me, the trauma-informed care means we have structures in place that can offer support to those families and those kids when they need it.
So the cycle doesn't continue.
And unfortunately, I don't see that in place. I work with the individuals that are having the overdoses, but I don't know who's working with the kids. And the system is set up in such a way, I don't want to go off on a tangent, but the system is set up in such a way that the schools can't even really do anything with the kids because, to do mental health, to provide something that looks like mental health, you have to get permission from the parent. But the parent is the individual who had the overdose, right? So I don't have the answers, but we're going to see a lot of traumatized children, and how that's going to manifest in the world, I don't know.
Yeah. We got a lot of work to do still.
Yeah.
So we've had a lot of good stuff in this conversation tonight, but before we get out of here, I want to transition real quick to some lighter, funner stuff and talk about some stuff that we've been watching, either TV, streaming, movies. So what's been on your movie list lately here, David?
What did I watch lately? I watched too much.
No such thing.
Not according to Jay.
I just watched again Dolores Claiborne, right? With I can't remember her name. Yeah, and I'd seen it before, I didn't know it was about trauma.
Oh,
I know. I was like, no.
Is that Kathy Bates?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
yeah.
Jay knows everybody.
I don't want to give away the plot, but I didn't know that it was about what we're talking about. I didn't.
It's been a long time since I've seen it, so I'm trying to remember the plot myself.
What was the name of it again?
Dolores Claiborne.
Yeah.
I'm not even familiar with that.
So I was all excited and settled in Sunday night to watch this show, thinking, "Yay, this should be good." And then it's like, "Oh no, it's
Back at work again."
yeah.
childhood trauma, dissociation of what had happened, and like, okay, well, I'm gonna have a piece of cake and ice cream before bed.
What about you, Alicia?
So we've just discovered as empty nesters Netflix. So everything that everybody's talked about 10 years ago, they're like, oh my gosh, this is us. We went through that is like my ultimate favorites. And now you probably know too much about me. Virgin Rivers, probably my second.
Oh, the new season comes out this Thursday. I can't wait.
What is that? Virgin River?
It's so good. If you're a fan of Hallmark, it's got a lot of the Hallmark actors and actresses.
I don't like Hallmark, and all due respect, you do.
but it has a very Hallmark kind of vibe to it.
It does.
You should not have admitted that on this podcast.
Sorry. And then
reverse it.
6 Feet Under, The Staircase, and Your Honor.
Oh yeah.
And then I watch crime TV, and I don't watch TV. I do. I watch 48 Hours.
Yes, I'm here for.
Oh, I love all those 48 Hours, 2020. I love those.
I watch. And football. That's all I watch on TV. So I'm kind of boring. I've never seen Dancing with the Stars, a full episode.
It's been a while since I've seen that one. Yeah.
I listen to music. I'm usually listening to music.
What's on your playlist?
Oh my gosh, yacht rock, classic rock, R&B. We have all of us have the same taste in music.
Yeah.
David, I was like, David, you like classic rock. And we were like on a plane one time we were talking and he's like, what you listening to?
We're all those extras.
James Taylor is just incredible. His 70s music. And I didn't know that they were all like friends. Carol King and Carly Simons.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm into the vinyl now.
Oh, me too.
Well, Kathy's a new vinyl aficionado. Yeah.
No, I'm like 3 years in now. I'm old enough. And I'm way too much money.
Called Hub City Vinyl. They have thousands of records, and they have a whole slew of like $2 vinyl.
Ooh.
I'm paying way too much money at Target and Walmart to buy stuff I already had that my parents sold in a yard sale. But you know what I'm looking for? I am looking for Stevie Wonder's greatest hits. It's a yellow album. It's a yellow cover, and I think the album is red, and I cannot find it.
Oh, that's a good one.
Amazon 37.
What's that?
Amazon may have that for like 37, anywhere between 37 and 69.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, maybe I need to revisit because the mouth look that has been out. But I do lots of vinyl now.
If Kathy's not looking for tea, she's looking for albums.
Mm-hmm.
If she's not looking for what?
Tea. She's a tea lover. She scans the globe for tea.
I have a problem. I'm in that.
So Yogi, you're like, no, I make my own or bag my own.
I do. I feel like I'm like a person making their own cigarettes. I have these bags and I'm stuffing them.
And Alicia, check this out. Kathy has a mug for a specific mood that day that she'll drink out of, and it changes every day.
This one is what I felt like tonight. Okay. You know, it change. Colors change, sizes change. If they're clear or not. The color, like if I have a clear mug, I'm might drink some blue tea. It's just what I feel like.
All right.
Tonight it's Ruby Oolong tonight. Ruby Oolong.
I had 50 mugs at work, and finally, the director said, "It's time."
Yeah.
No, you need to let me talk to that director. It's about your mood and it's self-care. Yeah. So you can use whatever one you feel like.
And it reminds me of I do this work because
I
get to hang out with Alisha in California. And here's my mug to prove it.
Here's your mug from that city,
Yep.
and there's a good memory there. Yeah.
Yeah.
I get it.
Well, we were at the coffee shop and we should have been at the University of
Yeah.
California.
Kansas.
Well, David, yours has some kind of logic to it. Like you travel and pick up a mug. That's kind of normal. Kathy just says, "I'm feeling X, Y, and Z, so I'm going to buy a mug for that feeling."
Exactly.
Well,
Yeah.
check out my mug.
There you go. Yep. We all have.
That's
Well,
good.
I have to get David one because Kathy's
That's
got one.
fine.
I've got one. Yeah.
Yeah, but I told Jay that's like a left-handed mug. If you're going to advertise it, like we're
I need to get my next batch with rating on both sides. Yeah.
writing on both sides. That's my suggestion for advertising purposes.
So, Kathy, what have you and the boys been watching lately?
So we have a handwritten list on a piece of computer paper folded in half of all the Christmas movies in the family that we want to watch. So we have it posted with a green highlighter. So every time we watch one, we highlight it off. So that's what we're doing. We're rolling the Christmas movies. Last night we watched Four Christmases. Monday night, when you were trying to convince me to watch something, we were watching your favorite movie, Elf.
Elf.
Yeah, so we're hitting them. We're rolling the Christmas movies.
So Marty,
that's what we do every year.
Marty's still hitting Hallmark.
Yeah, he is. I have not been joining him. He has been soloing it. I don't know what I'm doing, where I've been, but
I think me and Marty keep Hallmark in business because we're watching them.
so.
I watch them in the middle of the night when I can't sleep.
Oh, they always get the same.
They are. I'm starting to have a little bit of an issue because they're not really Christmas movies anymore.
Or rom-coms.
Right.
And they I've learned that they feed into the stigma of being single is a bad thing.
Right.
They do.
I've started to recognize that too, and I'm not liking that very much lately either.
Jay wants to break up Hallmark movie.
I told Kathy I'm going to write into Hallmark and say, listen, just make one every now and then where the happy ending, someone is single and they're happy. Just
And
every
they're
once in a
happy.
while. Yeah.
They don't pick the guy or girl.
Yes. Or have the sidekick, the friend of the main character, their journey be happy as single. Somewhere along the line, have somebody be single and happy. I'll be tickled with that.
I agree with you.
Yeah.
It's like the Cinderella. It's like, come on. Yeah, just stop.
So I'll tell you what I've been watching, Kathy, that I forgot to tell you about. That since you're a Harry Potter fan, you probably will like this. It's on Netflix. It's called The Magicians.
Huh.
And it's kind of a modern, updated, more adult version of Harry Potter. It's like
Really?
Hogwarts. It's like a college age school for magicians. And it's really been pretty cool. I've enjoyed it. I like Harry Potter. Not quite as much as you, but I like Harry Potter.
Mm-hmm.
So I've liked it as well.
Oh, if I followed Jay's recommendations and his are good, I would be in front of that TV like for about 3 or 4 months.
Well, I don't run a business and have 4 kids, so I have time to watch TV, Kathy.
I know, but I'm trying. Like my list is piling up.
And I went and saw last Friday. I went and saw Craven the Hunter.
Yeah.
At the
Craven the
movies,
Hunter. Okay.
which David I didn't realize was a Marvel character.
Yeah. I enjoyed it. The critics.
It was decent. It was kind of like it was not done by Marvel. It was just but they indicated that it's a Marvel character. They did the Marvel logo.
Oh, it wasn't by Marvel.
No, it was not done by Marvel Studios. Somebody else did it. And it was it's like a secondary kind of character.
It's a sidekick.
Nobody famous other than Ariana DeBose was in it. So you can kind of tell. It was okay though. It wasn't bad. It wasn't great. It was just kind of so-so.
That was Russell Crowe that played the father, right?
But yeah. But that Russell Crowe is not like Gladiator Russell Crowe. You know what I mean? He's like 100 pounds. He's like 100 pounds overweight, and he's like 70, and he's the bad guy. It's different. Did you see Gladiator 2?
Yes.
Did you like it?
It was interesting. I've never seen Denzel play a character like that.
It was. I liked it because it's a true sequel. It's a continuation of the first part 1, but it was weird because his character's so, even for that time that they're representing, his character was so different and so out there. Yeah. It was uneven. Like there was Denzel, and then there was everybody else.
Yeah.
Like his performance was like A+, and everybody else was just kind of getting by. You know what I mean?
Oh,
And,
okay.
and I like some of the gender norm
Yeah,
stuff that they played with.
the straddling the line. Yeah,
Yeah, I kind of felt like, are they trying to exaggerate this? And then there were some lines that he delivered that I thought he usually doesn't take, well, in my perception, he doesn't take roles that allow any inkling that they're
interpretation. Yeah.
right. So
See, because the whole time I'm thinking, this guy's the equalizer, and now he's this guy, and I'm thinking, is it because he's so good he can do either, or is it just weird to me that he's this character? I couldn't figure that out.
well, I didn't know that they actually could fill the Coliseum with water.
Yeah, they did that. That was how the original. That was how the origin was, that they were trying to replicate naval battles. That's how they first started, and then it evolved into the chariot fights and fighting the tigers and all that other kind of stuff. So yeah,
I have a friend that loves history like that, and I was like, they did what? He's like, oh yeah, back in those days they did fill it up with water, and it didn't leak. Right.
well, it did, but just it took long enough that they could still have the performance going.
Wow.
and it's pretty cool that at least part of that building is still standing. It's not intact, obviously, but it's still, you can kind of tell that it's somewhat still there to this day. So that's kind of neat.
All right, David, I found Stevie Wonder.
Oh, okay.
It's back in stock on Amazon, but it is $58.
Yeah.
But I might now. You might cause me to have to make that purchase.
Yes, Stevie's worth it.
And Luther Vandross came out Friday with his 2 album version.
What are we gonna do with these albums in like 5 years when we're like done with them?
I don't
Hold
know.
on to them. Don't sell them like our parents. In a
Hold
yard
on to
sale.
'em.
Yep, or an auction.
Yeah.
Like our mugs, we'll just keep them and they can bury them with us.
Go with the tunes.
That's right.
So I want to thank both Alisha and David for popping on here with us tonight.
100%.
And Alisha, I've told you this before, but I'm gonna say this for the listeners. Alisha has actually been very instrumental in the formation of Eastern Shore Talk. Alisha was very helpful for me in a very difficult point in my life. And she was actually the first one who brought the idea of me using my story to serve others. She was the very first person that ever talked about that to me. So Alisha is very instrumental in Eastern Shore Talk even becoming anything, let alone a podcast or anything. So I want to thank you again and again and again for that, Alisha. Just, for your friendship and for what you did for me during my difficult time. And thank you for helping me kind of steer towards this Eastern Shore Talk thing. And it's been a wonderful thing for me. And I just want to thank you. And thank you, David, for joining us. Very glad to meet you. I'm going to follow your musical stuff online.
Yeah.
We'd love to have both of you back again. It's been a treat talking to both of you. And you guys, thanks for tuning in. And we will check you out next time on Eastern Shore Talk. Take care, guys.
Thank you.